Okay, we're going to do this. Matt, Mercedes Schlapp, bring them in to the special election coverage tonight. Good to see you both. Mercedes, going to start with you. Let's talk about Graham Platner. You know, the elephant in the room here. He won big. It's going to be him versus Susan Collins. Just your thoughts on the fact that he did so well tonight. We exposed everything that was out there, all the scandal that you possibly could have with Graham Platner, and Maine voters went out and they cast their ballots for him. So talk about it.
Let's remember that it was also the early voting that helped propel Graham Platner to win this Democratic primary. The candidate that could have been a challenge was obviously Governor Janet Mills, who, as we know, ended up withdrawing from this primary, although her name was in certain areas in the state. But goodness gracious, I mean, talk about scandal ridden, and you have the Democrats still embracing him, still saying that, we stand with Graham Platner. Why? Because their only reason is to defeat Susan Collins and hence defeat Donald Trump in their own way. So it just shows you that the Democrats, they've lost their way, and they will take any candidate, despite the one scandal after the other, just to ensure that they can try to win the Senate. It's about very much a raw power grab there.
Yeah, Matt and Mercedes, we wanted to put together a little montage of what Democrats have said about Graham Platner, both pros and cons. Now, this is leading up to tonight's election. Mercedes, kind of to your point that I don't know that Democrats know exactly who they are anymore. Let's watch.
What do you say to someone that says, oh, Ro, I agree with Graham's policies. I'm glad you're going there. But, after the stuff coming out, my granddaughter. What do you say to someone like that?
If you believe in transformational politics, you need to believe in the ability for people to transform.
Being a dirtbag is not authentic. Being a dirtbag is being a dirtbag.
In American politics right now, the oligarchs have unlimited amounts of money. But there is one thing they do not have and that money can never buy. They do not have the people. They cannot put together enthusiastic grassroots organizations.
I look forward to the day where I am not answering every single week a question about bad behavior by another dude.
All right, Matt, take it away.
Yeah, it's interesting between Graham Platner and James Tallarico, this kind of strange candidate who's running in the state of Texas. I think all Republicans will be running against these two men. It shows the extreme nature of the Democratic Party, which, it's just odd. These are oddballs. These are people that you would be embarrassed to be associated with, and the Democrats put them up front and center. It's ironic. They're really handpicked. Graham Platner and James Tallarico in Texas, they thought these would be kind of like the populist voices that would help push back on and pick up these Senate seats. And I think what the American people are seeing that the Democratic Party, the Socialist Democratic Party, it's just not normal. I think Susan Collins will be returned to the Senate. I think Ken Paxton will win in Texas. And I'm beginning to get more and more optimistic that Republican Party, the party I'm proudly a member of, is going to do okay in November.
Yeah, I certainly think they will, given that. And that's, Matt, kind of what I want to talk about next is this socialist phenomenon happening across the Democrat Party. Zohran Mamdani, Katie Wilson. Of course, you've got Bernie Sanders, AOC, but Mercedes, now Graham Platner, endorsed by the socialists. He's even admitted that he was approached by workers with the Socialist Party to come together and build his campaign for him. And it's kind of resonating with Democrat voters, especially young people.
Right. Well, especially when you have the Zohran Mamdani model, you've also seen the rise of Rahman out in that mayoral race out in California and Los Angeles. And I got to tell you, it's incredibly disturbing to watch. You have Graham Platner using words like comrades. That's obviously something that the communists use all the time. And so I think one of the factors that we're seeing with the Democrats in and of itself is that they don't really have a vetting process. They're just taking in these what they consider to be these interesting candidates, out of the box candidates, but they're coming in, I think, with huge problems and I think policies that are not even what you would say traditional Democrat policies.
For sure.
It's way far to the left. It's all about government funding to the max. Universal health care. I mean, the list goes on, taxing the rich as much as they can. And so that in and of itself, I think, basically divides, it really, I think, disintegrates a lot of these states when you have these far left candidates running and possibly could win.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we interview a lot of Democrats here on Newsmax. And when we do, their response when we say, but what about these extreme candidates? They say, but the Democratic tent is very large. We let anybody come in.
Tent.
We're very open-minded. That tends to be the talking point. So we'll see how that plays out for them.
Look at what is attracted and what they've allowed into their party. Unbelievable. Matt Schlapp, Mercedes Schlapp, always a pleasure. Good to see you both.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.